Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this flash appeal launch in the wake of the terrible earthquake in Haiti earlier this week. Let me give a warm welcome to the podium to my colleague, the Permanent Representative of Haiti, and let me start by offering the most profound condolences of the United Nations system to the people of Haiti for the terrible and a horrifying catastrophe, the full consequences of which we do not yet know. It seems particularly appalling to be here yet again on this occasion when many of you will recall that it's not so long since we were here in the wake of the tragedy in Haiti in late 2008, when Haiti was struck by 4 successive hurricanes and tropical storms and suffered enormous damage, deaths and injuries at that point. As I say, it's doubly tragic that the people of Haiti were beginning to pick themselves up from that disaster and recover, and now inevitably those efforts have been set back once again, and they are reeling from this latest appalling event. I think you all understand that we have relatively little very reliable information from the ground at the moment because of the difficulties of communications, the breakdown of many services, and therefore some of the figures which you might sometimes expect on these occasions are not as accurate as we might like. I think what is clear is that the extent of the devastation is very great, that the loss of life is very great, thousands, tens of thousands, of course we do not know exactly, but it's certainly very great, and not only in Port-au-Prince, but outside the capital city as well, in some of the other cities, not least Jacmel, if I've understood correctly. So what is clear to us all, I think, is that we do need a major and urgent relief effort to help the people of Haiti affected by this appalling tragedy, even if we cannot put all the reliable figures on it. Let me just, by way of introduction, also say I apologize for the fact that there are no nameplates for your countries this afternoon due to the urgency with which this has been arranged, but I hope you will forgive us for that detail. Let me try to give you some details about the humanitarian response, which we are straining every nerve to mount, despite all the difficulties. First of all, we are focusing at the moment, the international community is focusing at the moment, particularly on the search and rescue side of things. There are still many, many people trapped under the rubble, and search and rescue teams from around the globe are on the ground and doing their best to help. The last I heard, there were 17 teams already on the ground and another 10 on the way, 27 altogether, and they will be doing their absolutely level best, despite all the difficulties, to rescue anybody who is alive. Of course, we're all aware that the chances of finding people alive diminish with every day that passes, but that effort will be maintained until the end. Then we have, obviously, the major needs on the medical side. Medical supplies, doctors and field hospitals and so on. Again, a major international effort is being and has been mounted on that front, and those things are beginning to arrive and tackle the situation. After that, there's a very urgent need for fresh water, clean water. I'm sure you're all aware of that. There will be a very major need also for food as we go along, for emergency shelter, and then of course for other non-food items, kitchen utensils and other items, again, as we begin to get the humanitarian effort scaled up. The effort is already well underway, of course. A massive effort is being mounted by many, many humanitarian organizations, UN agencies, NGOs, the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, and of course many countries bilaterally have offered help, have sent help. So the international response has been very generous, very warm-hearted and very urgent. We have begun to deliver aid on the ground, the Red Cross delivering extra medical assistance and other NGOs, the International Organization of Migration starting distribution of shelter materials and other non-food items, the World Food Programme beginning to deliver food in the shape of high-energy biscuits and ready-to-eat meals, and so on. That's largely from existing stocks, but other supplies are beginning to arrive rapidly, and so on. By the way, one detail, many of you may have seen a story that the World Food Programme warehouses in Port-au-Prince have been looted. That is not, in fact, the case. There are some difficulties of access to those warehouses, but they have not been looted. You're all well aware, of course, as well, that this operation is taking longer than anyone would like to get the supplies to the people on the streets of Port-au-Prince and elsewhere who are in desperate need. I hope you'll all recognise that there are some major logistical and operational challenges which face any operation of this kind, but are in some respects particularly difficult here. That is the extent of the destroyed infrastructure by such a devastating earthquake in an urban environment. Damaged roads, the port is out of action for the moment. The airport was damaged but is now more or less in full action but has limited capacity. The fact that the roads are clogged not only by the damage to them and by rubble but by the people on the roads, all of this is making mounting the relief effort and getting that relief distributed to people who need it on the streets of Port-au-Prince obviously taking longer than we would ideally like. We're all frustrated and impatient with that, but let me assure you again that everyone's straining every nerve to get that aid to people as quickly as possible. There are other issues which we face, including difficulties of transport, making sure there are enough trucks available and enough fuel available. But let me assure you again that teams from all the agencies and NGOs and elsewhere are arriving in increasing numbers. Supplies are arriving in increasing numbers. Warehouses are being provided. Distribution points have been identified, 15 in the city of Port-au-Prince. Depots are being identified where goods can be safely stored, waiting to be distributed. We're working well with the government. The government suffered grievously from the earthquake, as you'll all be aware. But the ministers are back up in operation in many cases. We are setting up coordination arrangements with them to make sure that we're working as closely together as we can be. And of course we are making a huge effort to make sure that the civilian humanitarian response is interfaced and coordinated with the military response, particularly from the United States, but not only from the United States, as closely as possible. And I'm glad to say that that cooperation is very good and very smooth so far. Otherwise, a few words on the coordination efforts. Obviously, we were fortunate in one sense. As you all know, the UN suffered very grievously itself from this earthquake, particularly the many people from MINUSTAH who are trapped under the rubble and whose fate is still unknown, although we have to fear the worst at this stage. But the humanitarian coordinator, the resident coordinator, humanitarian coordinator, did survive, was in operation from the first hours and is doing an extremely good job. We have a disaster assessment and coordination team on the ground. I think 10 of the 14 members of that team are there at the airport coordinating. Our own coordinating presence in Ocha is being built up very rapidly. We had a small office there already, but we will be multiplying that office by about 6 times in the next few days to make sure we can meet this coordination challenge. And of course the cluster system has been put into operation. We already have up and running the clusters dealing with food, water and sanitation, logistics, health and shelter, and we will be putting into operation other clusters covering education, nutrition, agriculture, protection and early recovery in the next day or two. So the tools are present, they are being used, and despite the enormous challenge of coordination of this kind of disaster, I'm confident that we will be able to rise to this challenge. Can I, before I go on to the details of the flash appeal, thank not only you for being here today, but also all the agencies and the NGOs who've cooperated in putting out this flash appeal in a very, very short space of time indeed. I think as it says in the introduction to the flash appeal, and as I've explained to others already, inevitably in the time available, this is less than 72 hours since the earthquake struck. This is a rough and ready, largely desktop-based assessment and appeal, but we've put as much detail on it as we have been able to in the time available. We've had extremely good cooperation from the agencies and NGOs, and we believe we've identified the right order of resources that we're going to need for the next 6 months and have set out the major priorities. Of course, this appeal will be revised, as all flash appeals are and should be, within 3 or 4 weeks to incorporate the better information we will certainly have by then, and to incorporate anything we've missed at the time. Let me say a word about the strategic priorities which are outlined in the flash appeal. I hope you've all got the text of this appeal already, either electronically or physically. What we're looking to do is obviously, in the first place, save lives through search and rescue, treatment of injuries and other critical, very short-term interventions. We also need immediate relief for the basic physical needs, as I've talked about already: water, food, emergency shelter, protection, and not least psychological recovery, which is going to be very important. We're also looking already to slightly longer-term solutions to make sure that we lead into the relief and recovery as well as we possibly can, and provide jobs for people in Haiti in the process, because that's going to be a crucial part of recovery as well. And we're making sure that whatever humanitarian planning we're doing will be synchronized and coordinated fully with the plans which are already beginning to be worked on for recovery and reconstruction in the longer term. The basis of the appeal is that we are assuming that 3 million people are badly affected enough to need immediate aid, and to need aid for a period of 6 months. That's the basic period of the appeal, with 3 million people affected. It is our estimation that the severe shaking of the earthquake affected something like 3.5 million people in the radius of the worst effects of the earthquake. So this is the basic calculation we've done. We're asking for a total for this 6-month period of $562 million to cover the needs that we've been able to identify so far. The breakdown of those needs, I'll give you roughly, but without giving you all the details. Food is, as always, the major requirement. We are allowing some $246 million for food aid to cover the next 6 months for feeding up to, I think, to 2 million people, if I've got that figure right. Water and sanitation and hygiene, clearly crucial. We're looking for $59 million. After that, nutrition, $48 million. Early recovery, $41 million. Emergency shelter and other non-food items, $37 million. Health, $34 million. Logistics, clearly crucial in this case, as in many such emergencies, $33 million. And finally, protection, $16 million. And education, $11 million. Those are some of the main breakdowns and the main categories and the main priorities, but of course there are others, and that's not a comprehensive account. So those are the basic facts and figures of the appeal. That's the idea behind it. As I say, we'll be revising it shortly, as soon as we have better information on which to base our further appeal. One or two other points, if I may, before I conclude and give the floor to my colleague from Haiti. You'll have seen reports that people are moving away from the capital, either to outlying areas, or in some cases perhaps in the direction of the Dominican Republic. That is a natural response and may be helpful in the short term, but we will be trying to make sure in the next weeks and months that we track those movements, can help people wherever they've gone to, but not only help them, but help the host communities and the host families which will be looking after them, because we're dealing with very poor communities in many cases, all of whom will need some particular help. We've already had, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think, a very generous and encouraging response from the international community, from companies, from individuals, from governments and major institutions so far. We have done a preliminary calculation of around $360 million which has been pledged so far. Not all of that is for immediate humanitarian assistance, of course. Some of it is for the longer-term recovery, including sums from the World Bank and IMF of that kind. $66 million has already been contributed, so we've already had an extremely generous response, and I think you'll all have seen in your own countries that this is one of those tragedies that has touched the hearts of people around the world, and many individual contributions, many companies are responding with extreme generosity, which is very encouraging to see, although of course in some ways it complicates the coordination challenge we face. We had already allocated, from day one of the emergency, $10 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to help kickstart the response, and parts of that are already being spent, so this has been money which is being used right away. I can say today that we're allocating a further $15 million, $15 million from SURF for immediate use towards the flash appeal, of course, so a total of $25 million from the SURF, and we will be ready to allocate more at a later stage if that proves necessary. We're obviously pleased to be using the SURF in that way, but we're very conscious that it's your money. This is money contributed by the donors and reflects the generosity that you have given in the past. Just one final point is that this is, as I said at the beginning, a massive tragedy, one from which the people of Port-au-Prince and elsewhere will obviously take time to recover. It will take time to rebuild. It will take a massive aid effort to rebuild. But I think we've heard from many people and from the government themselves a determination not to be deterred by this, to be resilient to it, from the international community, a determination that there should be a major attempt to build back better, to regard this in the classic way as a disaster which we can turn into an opportunity, even though it may be hard to look at it in that way at this particular stage. And of course, former President Clinton is very heavily engaged in that, was engaged in that very heavily before this tragedy struck. We're working extremely closely with him. He would have liked to be on the platform with me today to launch the appeal, but unfortunately wasn't able to be here in person. But he will be pursuing that medium-term, long-term effort to build Haiti back and give Haiti a new opportunity for its people for the future, with every great determination. And of course the UN system will be working with him very closely to do that.